The picture you see of my dad is on the Queen Mary returning to America after having escaped from the fascists. The fascists threw his brother in jail, beat him up, and so my dad supported the family all through the years. Working selling the grape allowed him to do that. And probably in our neighborhood, he was the only one that was able to do that. The only one that returned to Italy. And he supported his family all through the years. And I asked my dad, I said, Pop, how come you didn't have them come over? He said, because working in the mines is a terrible job. So he supported them over there. So when I arrived in Italy for the first time with my wife and my mother, my mom and dad, all of our relatives were at the airport waiting for us. And they said, your dad was not only your dad, he was our dad also. Yeah. So that's why we have such a wonderful relationship. Now, in my case also, and Hugo as well, spoke Italian before I spoke English. And most of our neighbors were illiterate and spoke only Italian. And my grandparents on my mother's side, my maternal grandparents, they were illiterate. They never learned a word of English. So I spoke Italian before I spoke English, and I was grammatically correct because my dad was a stickler for that. My dad had done a lot of reading in his lifetime, and everything he did was perfection. Now that photograph also shows you this outfit that he has on. He wore that to work in the mines. He would take those clothes off, he would hang them up, put on his working clothes, work all day long in the mines for 33 years, from 1920 until 1953, and he'd shower after he finished working and put on his clothes like he worked in an office. And everything he did was that way. Whether they were planting tomatoes or whatever he was doing, it had to be that way. I remember one time when he was making wine, my uncle sometimes would come and help him. And he'd come up that morning, and he forbid him to come in the cellar because he used an Old Spice shave lotion, aftershave lotion. He was afraid that might affect the taste of the grapes. So my dad was a fervent socialist, and in 1931, a fellow by the name of Gino Lucetti in Italy attempted to assassinate Mussolini by throwing a grenade at him. The grenade did not go off, and Gino Lucetti was then put in jail. And I was born in 1932, and my father named me after the fellow who attempted to assassinate Mussolini. Okay? So, and my brother, Hugo, H-U-G-O, was named after Victor Hugo. And his favorite book was Les Miserables, and then my dad had read it in Italian. And of course, the protagonist in Les Miserables led a similar life to the one my dad did. But anyhow, he had read a great deal of Victor Hugo's works. My dad was a follower of Clarence Darrow. He had a number of his books, and he really loved his philosophy. You know, yeah. Huh. Clarence Darrow came here to settle one of the coal mines at one point. Wow. My father has his little blue books. In fact, I took a picture of them, of all his little blue books by Clarence Darrow. Yeah. Now, they used to do that. They would be like stuff that nobody else would print. Let me say subversive. That was subversive. Socialism and communism was very subversive. So my dad used to always say to me also, he worked, this is a good part of the story, he worked in the mines. The old forge had about 10,000 people. And part of people who came from northern Italy and then southern Italy. like calabrese, like my wife. Her father was illiterate, and he worked in the mines, non-union. He made $5 a day. My father worked in the mines, unionized. He made $10 a day. And my dad always said, you don't need a union if you had good employers. But this is what happens when. So when I was in my group, Delta Medics, I gave, in addition to Social Security, I put 20% of their income away. Everybody's and ours. And so I have to fight with some of the members of my group. They used to call me the socialist, but I try to say, like, if I don't defend them, they give them nothing, just Social Security, Yeah. My mother was a very kind person, and she would help us with our homework to maybe 6th grade, kept us very neat. I remember her cutting my fingernails. In fact, people say I have a great deal of curiosity having gone back to school. And I think it all started with my mother cutting my nails, and then in a couple of weeks they'd grow back again. I said, what the hell is that all about? And then it started my interest in science. When I was 11 years old, I was hit in the eye with a rock. A boy with a slingshot hit me. I was forbidden to have a slingshot. He had a slingshot the night of February 23, 1944, freezing cold night, carrying a slingshot. And he put it through the air to a group of boys, and I hit my eye. And that may have had a good effect because I didn't know what I was going to study, but I had to have surgery about 4 times when I was 11 years old. My cataract was removed, and essentially the rest of my life I lived on just my left eye. But you couldn't tell it until recently. And one time when I applied for a job with Bakelite when I was about 18 or 19 years old, Bakelite turned me down. You couldn't tell I had it. They didn't give us an eye exam, but I told them that I had an eye injury, and they didn't hire me. After that, I never told anybody that I had an eye injury. And it wasn't until 3 or 4 years ago that you could tell. But I always practiced with one eye. So it's very possible that my influence from Dr. Jordan, who operated on me, was very kind, maybe influenced me into being a physician. But I didn't start studying as a pre-med because I didn't think that perhaps maybe I couldn't do it. And I didn't want to try something and be a failure. So I started out by taking science, took my science courses at Keystone. I was a physics major. Then when I went to Penn State, I was a general science major. And I took all the courses necessary, but then I took education as a minor. I loved teaching. We had a wonderful chemistry teacher in Old Forge, Mr. Klaus. And I did student teaching with him and with Mr. Schrenlo, also a wonderful teacher. And they were wonderful mentors. And so then I changed my curriculum. A friend of mine from Wilkes-Barre, Gaetano Passananti, whose mother was from Old Forge, he was a biochemist, and then I started taking biochemistry courses. And then when I finished, I decided to go into biochemistry to get on my master's. And then I did that. When I was working in biochemistry, I was in the lab killing mice, studying livers. I said, I don't think I want to do this. And so that month in October, there was an exam for medical students, even though everybody had been accepted already. So I decided to apply, take that exam, and by accident, I was walking down a path in that October, after I made that decision, and I was walking down the path, and I bumped into Dr. Olerwein. Dr. Olerwein was the professor of organic chemistry. He taught me organic chemistry for 1 year. When I said to him, hi, Dr. Olerwein, he said, oh, Gino, I'm so glad I saw you. I didn't know that he ever knew my name because I never talked to him in class. And he said, Gino, he said, there's they need a chemist. Penn State needs a chemist out in Altoona, and it's paying $4,000 a year. Now, mind you, PhDs, if they could get a job at that time, were getting $3,200. I said, well, thank you, Dr. Olemine, but I says, I changed my mind. I decided I want to be a physician. He said, okay. Right away, immediately, he said, you apply to all the schools in Pennsylvania, not to the University of Pennsylvania, because everybody who's been accepted there, they don't turn it down. He says, so they're closed, but apply everybody else. I'll write a letter for you. Get your 2 doctors to write a letter for you from back home, right? And I did all that. I came home. I know what I did is I took the test then. I took the test. That morning I had to take a biochem test at 8 o'clock. 9 o'clock I took the MedCat test. And then I went home at Thanksgiving and I told my parents that what I had done, and my girlfriend, who thought I was going to be a teacher. And I told them I applied. December the 10th, I got accepted. And within 6 weeks, my whole life changed.